When astronauts arrive on Mars with colonization plans, they are surprised to learn that humans have already walked the red planet before. The astronauts who are leaving the next day on a trip to Mars are being honored with a party. There's Nicholas, the bad boy who's attempting to get laid before he leaves, the only married pair on the mission, Woody and Blake, the international astronauts, Sergei and Renee, and the two teams of American astronauts, Phil and Luke. To complete the gang, Luke is anticipating the arrival of another astronaut by the name of Jim. Before he leaves, his wife requests that he have a word with their son, Bobby. Bobby tells Luke he'll miss him and wonders who will read to him when he's away at camp. Luke claims that he and Bobby will be reading the same book each night during their time in space. Jim shows up and joins the festivities, and everybody is overjoyed to have him there. Jim, Woody, and Luke are having a nice time after the party, but when Jim brings up a woman named Maggie, the mood quickly turns sour. Jim and Luke learn that Jim's wife Maggie is also an astronaut via a conversation they have. Both Jim and Maggie have a lifelong ambition to one day travel to Mars. Unfortunately, Maggie became unwell, and Jim had to abandon the Mars mission to tend to her. Maggie died in the end. Luke is disappointed that Jim and Maggie won't be able to go to Mars because, in his opinion, they are the ones who most deserve to go there. Jim insists it's fine, but it's obvious that he's sad as Luke leaves. Luke, Renee, Sergei, and Nick's 13-month journey to Mars is finally over. One of their rovers has discovered a peculiar mountain, and upon closer inspection, they realize it has a metallic peak. They think it's ice, and that there might be a huge water supply hidden beneath the mountain. Woody, Terry, Phil, and Jim are all in the World Space Station, so they transmit the message to them. The station was informed of their impending departure to investigate the peculiar mountain. When Luke and the others finally reach the peak, they get a mysterious transmission in their headsets. Radio wave radar readings reveal that the mountain is made of metal rather than ice, despite appearances to the contrary. Luke insists there must be a miscalculation and suggests increasing the radar's output and moving it closer to the target. As they do so, a powerful pulse of energy emanates from the mountain, rendering their devices useless. Then, a tornado forms and swallows everything in its path. Like a conscious person, the tornado draws in Sergei, Renee, and Nick, killing them all but Luke. When the dust from the tornado settles, a massive metallic face will be visible where the mountain once stood. After the powerful electromagnetic pulse from Mars was detected, practically all transmissions were lost, prompting an emergency conference back at the World Space Station. A severely damaged video transmission reveals a badly hurt Luke reporting that his whole crew had been killed in an attack. Woody tries to persuade the captain of the World Space Station to launch a rescue mission for Luke, but the captain refuses, saying that Luke may already be dead and that they have no way of knowing if going to Mars is safe. Phil argues that they can organize their expedition more effectively with the help of data supplied from one of the Saturn probes currently flying near to Mars, and the captain agrees. Woody explains to the captain that only Jim can pilot the spacecraft to Mars safely since he has spent the most time preparing for the journey and because he and Maggie came up with all of the mission's ideas. At first hesitant, the captain eventually gives up. Jim, Woody, Terry, and Phil have been traveling for several months and are getting close to Mars. When Jim walks up on Phil creating DNA out of sweets, Jim swallows Phil's creation. Woody informs Jim that in a few hours the Saturn probe will approach Mars and provide crucial landing data. 3 burials can be seen near the previous team's base camp in photographs captured by the Saturn probe. Phil assumes this indicates Luke is still alive, but Terry explains that it simply means nobody was present to bury him. The source of the energy pulse is investigated, and the same pulse is seen being released from the location. They suspect the probe is at fault. Micrometeoroids start hitting their ship just as they're about to enter Mars, ripping holes in it and letting the air leak out. Despite Woody and the crew's best efforts, the fuel tanks were also damaged by the meteorites, and they had to be sealed from the inside and the outside. Fuel seeps as they prepare to enter Mars' atmosphere, and an explosion occurs when they activate the engine. They are stuck going into space with nothing but their space suits and a tether between them. A refueling module left in Mars orbit after earlier expeditions is their target, but it is further away than they anticipated. Woody chooses to use his jetpack's last bit of fuel to fly full speed at the refueling module, where he plans to attach a grappling gun cable. This will buy some time for the remainder of the group to make it to the module without being harmed. He tries the move, succeeds in tying the wire, but then overshoots, leaving him alone in space with no jetpack fuel. Terry is heartbroken and insists that they go rescue Woody, but Jim and Woody are both aware that it's physically impossible. Terry tries to return for the rescue anyhow, but Woody tells her to turn around before she runs out of gas and becomes stuck. She tries to retrieve Woody with the grapple gun, but the wire is too short. Terry says she's going to move closer and try again, but Woody knows she'll die saving him. So, he takes off his protective headgear and gives his life so that she will stop. The refueling module is successfully landed on Mars by Jim, Terry, and Phil. They make it back to the previous mission's base camp, where much of the equipment is damaged but repairable. Jim is astonished to discover that plants are actually growing in the experimental greenhouse. Jim is attacked from behind by Luke. Jim convinces Luke that he is not having a hallucination by telling him that he is reading the same book that Luke's son Bobby is reading on Earth. Luke is in critical condition and believes Jim to be a hallucination. Luke begins to relax. He describes to them how he made it through the year by tending to plants in the greenhouse. He fills them in on what happened to the rest of the team. He doesn't just say he made it, though. He claims he was saved for a reason. He claims he was kept alive so he could discover the truth. Jim presses Luke for details, and Luke produces a photo of the massive metal mask. It was the iconic face on Mars, which had been seen from satellites before but was initially thought to be a mountain. According to Luke, someone intentionally put it there. Jim wants to know what kind of signal Luke's team picked up while they were so close to the face. After a year of studying the signal, Luke adds, he realized that the signal's pattern in physical dimensions resembled a picture of DNA. He claims the entities who carved the face into the rock intended it to be a self-portrait, a statement of who they are, a signature. Terry realizes it's not human because the DNA is lacking the final set of chromosomes. Jim recalls his talk with Phil as he drops some candy while they are preparing for the trip home. The DNA snapshot, he now understands, is not a signature but a test. They need to show their humanity by completing the final chromosomal pair. The radio signals from Luke's radar were misinterpreted as the erroneous answer to the exam, prompting the face to launch an attack on Luke's crew. According to Jim, the radar's radio waves need to be rearranged in order to provide the correct response and complete the genetic code. The rest of the team is reluctant, but Jim manages to convince them that if they don't do this, the entire mission and the lives of everyone involved will have been in vain. The radar is sent to the face via rover for security purposes. After sending the radio wave with the DNA puzzle solution, a white door appears in front of their eyes. Jim, Terry, and Luke have decided to visit the face, and they have instructed Phil to repair the return journey module and go once he is finished, regardless of their whereabouts. Radio contact with Phil is severed when Jim, Terry, and Luke enter through the face and the door closes behind them. They take off their helmets after realizing the interior air is safe to breathe. They go into a solar system replica in 3 dimensions. Mars is depicted as a blue and green planet in the solar system. It's narrating a story about how a meteor wiped off Mars's human population. From behind Luke, Terry, and Jim, a thin red entity emerges to continue telling the tale. Martians uploaded their genetic information into a ship that was left behind after they left in spaceships to settle in other universes. It was on this vessel that the first single-celled life arrived on Earth. Over millions of years, those organisms evolved into today's humans. Mars is the true origin of life on Earth. For future generations of Earthlings to return and discover their own origins, we carved that face into Mars. They're able to reconnect with Phil through radio, and he informs them that a storm is on the horizon and that they should head back to the module before it's too late. Jim deduces that the face is a ship and that the countdown to launch has begun. Jim announces that he will be remaining behind as Terry and Luke prepare to leave. He claims that all that has happened is an open invitation to visit Mars and meet his Martian forefathers. It's in his blood, it's his calling. Luke and Terry decide to release Jim. Terry and Luke exit the vehicle, and they run to catch Phil's departure in the return voyage module. Meanwhile, Jim is being hoisted into a compartment on a small ship. Jim becomes concerned when water levels in the compartment start to increase. As the water level increases, he holds his breath, but then learns he can breathe in it. His anticipation of the trip to a new world causes him to reminisce over his entire life with his friends and his wife Maggie. After exiting Mars's atmosphere in the return travel module, Terry, Phil, and Luke see Jim's ship flying by, presumably transporting him to another galaxy. Luke watches the spaceship blast off into the void of space and sends his best wishes to Jim.